October the 1st is just around the corner. The date will prove pivotal as to the direction of our economy, and most signs point to it not being very good. In fact, it could lead to an economic collapse if the worst case scenarios play out. And in this scenario, we need to pay special and close attention to gold and silver through these times. We're going to talk about all of it in this video as we explore. There are two different events that are occurring on that day, October the 1st, that could have a detrimental impact on the economy. The first one may take a while to manifest itself, and we're going to start there. And it's something that I've discussed before, and that is the Federal Reserve's mandate that large banks meet capital requirements beginning October the 1st. Large bank capital requirements are informed by the board's stress test results, which they had, and they provide a risk-sensitive and forward-looking assessment of capital needs. And what is required here? That they have common equity Tier 1 capital requirements, which make up several components, which includes the minimum capital requirement, which is the same for each bank at 4.5%. The stress capital buffer requirement, which is based in part on the stress test results in at least 2.5%, and a capital surcharge, if applicable, for the largest and most complex banks, which is updated in the first quarter of each year to account for the overall systemic risk of each of these banks. Now, this is after the stress test results that they had put out and published earlier this year. So that would give us some indication that likely a lot of these big banks will be able to meet these requirements. But if the bank's capital dips below its total requirement announced, then the bank is subject to automatic restrictions on both capital distributions and discretionary bonus payments. So that may not seem like a very big deal, but as time continues to move around, the wheel of time spins. Well, typically we know what they have been saying, covering themselves, as the Federal Reserve often does, with all different scenarios that can play out. They have pretty much bet on and made predictions that more banks will fail. Bank failures are something that has not been talked about recently, but it is a very real possibility that we could see more of that happening, especially when you take into account that just a few more of these things that could occur. It wouldn't take much, especially for the total assets that are going to be involved in this. And we have talked about that in the past too. That's a pretty big deal, but not really when you take into account what we had in 2007 and 2008. About the same amount, maybe a little bit more total assets lost, but far more banks involved that had fallen. Whereas this time, especially considering the risk that some of these banks had, a lot of the same stuff is going on that under a different name that occurred back in 2007, 2008. Well, we are setting ourselves up for the same type of deal, maybe even worse, especially considering that we live in an era of consistent and persistent inflation. Inflation is not going away, folks, even at 2.5%, which is the official numbers that are given out by the agencies that we refer to as the chefs of the Cook the Books Club. But inflation is still here, and those are the official numbers. When you take into account through the course of the entire period of inflation, we're talking over 20% inflation. And when you add all of that up and you see other goods and services that are affected, it's much more than 2.5%. And that is what we're looking at upon which we find ourselves with these new requirements that banks are going to be held to by the Federal Reserve starting on the 1st of October. And again, that may take a while, but if that does occur and we see a couple of these banks fall, especially considering other areas of the economy that are hurting, especially employment. Employment is something that we're seeing affected negatively now, with 810,000 unexpected jobs that have been lost and that have been accounted for and with revisions with the Bureau of Labor and Statistics. That's not good news in and of itself. Then we have this. I've heard rumblings about this, but have not paid very close attention. Thanks to members of this community, Tony Erickson and others, made me aware that October 1st is also the deadline for a potential strike at the busiest U.S. ports as 45,000 workers prepare to walk off the job. The Longshoremen's Union says wage demands must be met or members will strike on October the 1st, and that will be the first time since 1977. 1977, by the way, was also a period of at the beginning of heightened inflation and economic calamity. And this is something we're seeing potentially repeating here as well. This is from The Guardian. 10 of the busiest ports in North America are at risk of shutdown next week as a leading union warns that 45,000 workers stand ready to walk off the job if industry operators fail to make key concessions. The International Longshoremen's Association, ILA, has accused the United States Maritime Alliance, USMX, which represents 40 ocean carrier and terminal operators, of making insulting offers to staff demanding higher pay and commitments on automation. Now, why do they want higher pay? Well, because because wages are not keeping up with inflation. For the most part, and that is one of the problems. And this is why the economy is tough right now, and people aren't able to make some purchases and buying other things to protect themselves against inflation of rising prices later on, especially for non-perishable goods. Workers are slated to strike on October the 1st, that's Tuesday, if a new agreement is not reached, hitting 36 ports along the east and Gulf Coast of the U.S. in what would be the first work stoppage since 1977. J.P. Morgan analysts have estimated the strike could cost the U.S. economy $5 billion a day. Wow. A one-day strike backlog could take an estimated 4 to 6 days to clear, according to analysts at Sea Intelligence, a shipping advisory firm. And you think about all of the troubles we had during the pandemic and all of the backlog as well there, how long that took for the supply chains to reconnect. This is huge, folks, and this could lead to a halt in the economy, literally an economic collapse, possibly. Bargaining between the two sides came to a halt in June after the union accused USMX of violating the current contract by implementing the use of automation at ports, including in Mobile, Alabama. ILA leaders claim the technology is an autogate system used to automate the processing of trucks into ports was being used to replace union labor. God forbid we make advancements in technology, but that's kind of stuff we knew was going to be happening for some time. People really need to adapt to those changes. It's just the nature and the way things are moving. But I digress. And the union says it has been in contact with the USMX several times in recent weeks, but the USMX has so far declined to increase its offer on pay. The ILA is demanding significant wage increases. I think it's about 40% from what I gather, which that alone will be that big of an increase, and not the use of automation and the like is going to have an effect on the economy too, just in a different way. It'll take a little bit longer, but everything probably will go up because of that. Now, the healthcare improvements and also no automated terminals at semi-automated terminals at the ports. For years, labor unions representing U.S. port workers have criticized automation for resulting in significant job losses while shipping corporation profits soared. So you kind of gets into the minutia of this and what it's about, but it is something to see this play out that could literally shut down the economy. Now, I predict probably this will be agreed to because they don't want to lose $5 billion of economic loss, and it could cause a wider, more widespread and delicate economy we find ourselves in now. But it could ripple out, cascading out into a very difficult situation that could literally lead to a collapse if it goes on for too long. And recovering from that is going to take quite a long time for sure. I don't want to see anybody lose their jobs. Automation is a real threat, obviously, but I think this is something we've seen coming for quite a long time, and I do think that it's going to come upon us as individuals to be agile and to adapt to change. It's just part of life. How can that happen? Well, I think there's ways that can occur, especially with learning about how the automation works. Maybe looking for jobs in automation, and so that progress can continue, and even operating some of those machines. But it involves training, and it does involve, uprooting and upending, as far as your life to make that happen. But that's just one thing, and I know it's a lot more complex than that as well. And but nonetheless, I hope it all works out. But what will gold and silver do in this situation? Well, gold and silver very well could come through those ports. The western ports will not be affected here. It's only the East Coast, which means there's going to be more stress on the western ports, and that alone still is going to have a dramatic impact. And gold and silver, a lot of that will come through those ports physically as well. And also, what's going to happen to the price of gold and silver? Well, I think initially, especially silver's price could fall dramatically. I won't say collapse, but it could fall. Maybe even if we do see an actual economic collapse, prepare for silver to fall in half in price, maybe even more than that. We saw that happen before when everything was shut down in March of 2020. And then a rebound will be probably massive for silver, recovering all of its losses and then gaining some. And to what extent that will be, I'm not sure. In due course, it depends on the shape of this economic calamity that we could find ourselves in. And then couple that with what I talked about at the beginning, with the bank failures that could be coming after this, then you've got yourself a real situation on our hands that, the dollar can continue to lose value with inflation rearing its head again, stagflationary environment that could, in turn, potentially lead to either a massive deflationary period or a hyperinflationary period, none of which is good, especially considering the dollar and the faith in the dollar could decrease. Its impact on the world, around the world, could be decreased. Therefore, there's only one place left to turn to, and that is precious metals, gold and silver. And that is kind of the worst case scenario. Why do I say that's a worst case scenario when gold and silver will actually shine in the end? Because there's going to be so much problems and so much heartache and literal hurt, economic pain that have gold and silver just means you're just going to be surviving to get by. And what that's going to look like and transpire with other parts of your life, you probably will be wishing for the days of gold and silver being boring and not talked about a whole lot in terms of its price performance. That's how bad things could get in that regard. You may just be fortunate to have your gold and silver on hand, but there's so many other things and other areas you maybe wish you would have prepared for, which probably would have been as much or even more important than gold and silver. That's the kind of thing and situation we have to think about. Be prepared. Stack your preparedness, as a quote from Who's Your Stacker. That's the way we make our way through this, is to be prepared in all aspects, gold and silver being a part of it. So there you have it. A troubling situation indeed. October the 1st. We'll see what happens. My hope is that it turns out to be a nothing burger, and it very well could be. Like I said, the Federal Reserve requirements, that's going to take a while to manifest itself. And if they don't reach an agreement on the port and there is a strike, then watch out. That could be the beginning of a serious situation on hand. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section down below. Hope you found this video informative, insightful, and educational. Would like to extend a multitude of gratitude to each and every one of you for watching, and to encourage you to please rate, share, comment, and subscribe.